I'm going to read it, or I'm going to have Mom read it. It says, make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. So, let us enter his gates with thanksgiving in our hearts. Let us enter his courts with praise. I will say this is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice, for he has made us glad. He has made us glad, oh, he has made us glad. I will rejoice, for he has made us glad. He has made me glad, oh, he has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. Anybody else heard that song before?
Yeah.
You guys can stop with me.
No, some of it sounds familiar, real familiar.
Yeah.
You've heard me say this before, that in one of our services, people have always made prayer requests, and I said, who would you like to see be saved? You've heard me say that more than once, I think. The young lady said, I'd like to see my husband saved. And he was sitting right there beside her. He was sitting right there beside her. She had just got saved she had just been saved and still is when Alan Harris was preaching the revival. And she brought her husband the next Sunday when I was there and had invited him to come to one of our Bible studies with her sister. And he had never been in church. His sister played the piano. His other sister was very active in our church. And he had never come to church. He thought he was a good person. Well, he was in that degree. And she said, I'd just like to see my husband saved. He turned about 3 different shades of color.
He hadn't been in the church long, that he left off this.
Well, it was better. He said later it was the best thing in the world that happened. He came to church to see what in the world was at that church that made her life change. He wanted to see her life so changed dramatically that he wanted to find out what kind of preaching she was hearing that changed her life. And so he came, and we had prayer requests, and we did this all the time. We mentioned names that we thought needed to be saved, whether they were there or not. They would do that. And 3 or 4 weeks later, he became a Christian. He was on his way to becoming a Christian. How do you know he got saved? Because that was 30 years ago, and they're still in church. They've raised 5 kids, and all 5 kids are out on their own and getting married and having children, and they're still serving the Lord. That's how I know he's still saved. And I think that sometimes we need to specifically pray for people that truly need to know the Lord. And I trust it will be it. 1 Peter tonight, briefly. Hammer's not. Oh, it's turning. Frankie. Sorry. I could turn it this way. Who is that? I don't know if I know them.
You'll get some more of that funny looks and stuff on the camera.
Sunday morning it was all on Pauline. Yes, it was. I like that. It was fine.
Oh God.
If you sit where Richard sat, you got it.
Was Ava in it with her?
Yes.
That's fine.
And okay. 1 Peter chapter 2. We're in verse 13 and 14 again. Wherefore, gird up your loins of your mind, and so forth, and be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ, as obedient children, not fashioning yourself according to the former lust in your ignorance. but as he which hath called you is holy. So be ye holy in all manner of conversation, because it is written, Be ye holy, for I am holy. What we have been doing then in the last couple of weeks is trying to understand what that means. Holiness it's really necessary. Is it really necessary for a Christian to be holy or to live holy? Is it necessary for a Christian to live holy? And that probably is the question we want to ask ourselves. There is certainly a lot of things I want to say about holiness. Holiness is not a series of do's and don'ts, but conformity to the character of God and obedience to the will of God, accepting with contentment whatever circumstances God allows for me is very much a part of a holy walk. It's not, I don't do this, and I don't do that, and I don't do this, and I do this, and I do that. That's not holiness. Holiness is an attitude in your heart towards God. 1 Thessalonians 4, 3 through 7. Paul uses the term in contrast to a life of immorality and impurity. Peter uses it in contrast to living according to the evil desires which we had when we lived outside of Christ. John contrasts one who is holy with those who do wrong and are vile, Revelation 22:11. To live a holy life, then, is to live a life in conformity to the moral precepts of the Bible and in contrast to the sinful ways of the world. It is to live a life characterized by the putting off of your old self, which has been corrupt by the deceitful desires, and putting on, Ephesians chapter 4, verses 22 and 24, putting on new stuff. When you take off the old flesh, you put on a new nature. What you used to do before you were saved, you are transforming into something different. It is putting off and putting on. It is learning to take away those things that you used to do in the old life that was distracting you from living for the Lord, and adding new good stuff that is in contrast to what you used to do. Many people do that. We can illustrate that in many ways. And there are people who get saved and they go right back doing exactly the same thing they did before they got saved. Then they didn't get saved. Because they continue to live exactly the same way they did before they, quote, made a profession of faith. To live a holy life. So then, why is holiness, if holiness is so basic to the Christian life, why do we not experience it more in our daily living? Why do so many Christians feel constantly defeated in their struggle with sin? Why do the Church of Jesus Christ so often seem to be more confronted or conformed to the world around it than to God? And that happens. Peter tells us how we are to arrive at this holiness. So the question is, if we are to be that way, how do we arrive at that? In other words, a Christian struggles with sin, and then here's Peter saying, let me help you figure out how you can begin to live holy. If I could tell you how you could have $1 million, none of you can because you're too old. My father-in-law says, if you start saving money for your child early, by the time he retires, he can be a millionaire. There's a plan to doing that. There is a plan that God has that you can learn to live a holy life. It doesn't come automatically. Verse 14 gives us one of the answers, not fashioning yourself according to the former lust in your ignorance. Don't act like you used to. Don't act like you used to. Not fashioning yourself. Notice the text. Here and in Romans 12:2, the outward pattern in contrast with the inward change. To form together, to conform, rules of conduct, even in religious perception. To pattern one's action or life after. And reminds these Christians that obedience to God and holiness of life are radically different from a life that follows natural, that is, non-Christians. Desires whenever they lead. Doing God's will is the opposite of doing what the remaining sin makes us feel like doing. If you, prior to your salvation, were engaged in your ignorance in things of the world, and they were pulling you down, and you've done it for a long period of time, just because you get saved on Monday doesn't mean you're going to quit on Tuesday. Say you've cussed all your life and used God's name in life all the time. Well, it's not, your conversation needs to be holy, so you've got to quit that, but it doesn't mean you're going to quit on Tuesday if you got saved on Sunday. You following me?
Yeah.
You will struggle at your life pattern that you've had. That's the reason that Ecclesiastes says it's good for a person to be saved when they're young because they won't want to do it. I have no problem with, I don't smoke, drink, cuss, and run around with girls that do. I don't have that problem. You know why? Never did it. If you've never done it, you don't struggle with it. Right? But if I was raised in that atmosphere all of my life, and I got saved at 25 or 35, guess what? Those patterns are still going to be there. And once I learned, well, the pattern that I'm living, I did in my ignorance. If I'd been smart, I'd have quit doing all that stuff. But I got in the habit of doing it. Now, as a Christian, I realize I shouldn't be doing that, because it's not glorifying the God, and secondly, it's not helping me as a person or in my body. So every morning you get up, you've had a habit for 35 years, you still want to do it the week you get saved. I mean, that's no question. It may be cheating, lying, it may be whatever you've done all your life. It's not easy to get over it. And what happens is Satan will say to you, I thought you got saved. I thought you got saved. You're doing the same things you did before you got saved. And guess what? You must not be saved. And you still have the same desires to do it when you were sitting out. The Satan will throw it up to you.